good to be back with Heidi Hollis, who's had a lot more strange experiences than I thought she did. I mean, oh my God. I mean, I'm a rough old buzzard, but I don't know how I'd held up under all that. Before we talk about anything on that, before the show, I was talking to Joe about Chris Christie. Now, you remember we had a show about the fellow that was done wrong by Chris Christie and so forth. And you know, Chris Christie, for whatever wackadoodle reason, has decided he's a Dallas Cowboy fan. And I think it was to get in the public eye that he could show up at Jerry Jones's owner's box and, you know, be high-fiving the owner's group and all that, like he's just a big buddy with Jerry Jones. And which is strange for a guy from Jersey and all that. But anyway, several years ago, there was a Super Bowl in New Orleans, and I was down there. And there was a casino. Jerry Jones and his wife were coming out. I just said hello. Jerry was kind of half drunk, but he still could function and talk to you. And most of the players were in that casino. But at any rate, I say hello to Jones, and I'm just about 6 foot tall. I'm not a giant man. And I'm pretty wide, but I mean not 6 foot average size. And I towered over Jones like he was one of those little creatures that you just talked about. And, I was like, boy, what a little fella. And, it was no big deal. Big wallet, little fella. But at any rate, what I'm saying is the pictures of Chris Christie, there's something missing in the translation here. It's a little mystery. Because Chris Christie was in the owner's box with Jones. And, of course, they were during the Cowboy game when they were playing the Lions and then I think also the Packers. They were showing shots of Jones and Christie, and they were yakking at each other and all that. Anyway, it showed Chris Christie to be about 3 inches shorter than Jones. Which, my goodness, Heidi, if I'm looking down at this guy, and I'm just an average-sized guy, or maybe a little bigger than average, but still right about average, and I'm figuring he's no more than 5, 6, or 7. What the heck size is Chris Christie? I mean,
wow.
And they showed another picture of Chris Christie on the field at Cowboy Stadium, and he was shorter than Jones. I'm saying this little guy, if he weighs about 300, he's got to be about as tall as he is wide. I mean, this is a little bowling ball of a dude.
That's just wrong of you, Kev.
but that's not all. We were also remarking before the show was Chris Christie had a lap band about a year ago. This guy looked like he weighed an easy 300 now. I mean, what did he start out at? 500? I mean, I'm just saying this guy's like a little monster. That's all I'm saying. He'd be a good fugitive from your dreams. I mean, what a troll. But at any rate, we just thought that was kind of interesting. And since he's actually, believe it or not, he's a foul little troll. And I don't care how, he's not a handsome man, but he's a troll that closed the bridge into New York. And I mean, he's just a no good lowdown. And we're going to have this foul little troll. Oh, that isn't all he did. They had a picture of him on YouTube where when the Cowboys lost the game with the catch that was nullified by the referees.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Christie was making, you remember Dr. Evil would stick his little finger up near his mouth and, made, a little gesture, Dr. Evil's gesture from the movie, right? Chris Christie did that. Like he's a little evil, trolly Dr. Evil or something. At any rate, I'm sure the point of the whole story is these photos, once they come out, will probably sink Chris Christie and he'll go back to the Jersey swamp where he belongs. But, I know that's a departure from paranormal things, but I thought it was funny enough to tell you. It was just a blast.
Goodness, that's funny.
I mean, the creature from the Black Lagoon or something. Anyway, but the Dr. Evil thing with a little finger right in the side of his mouth was really just perfect. I mean, whoever Christie's opponents are in the upcoming Republican fight-off for the convention, they'll love those photos. It's just... They'll think they just won the Irish sweepstakes, I promise you. But anyway, by the way, I don't mean to cut out for just a second away from the paranormal issues, but you do realize, now this is an interesting topic, and we'll get back to paranormal issues because you've sure got plenty more. But what I'm saying is, you do realize those games were crooked, right?
I don't know.
Okay. Well, now look, I might have mentioned this on one of the shows after it just happened, but the Cowboys-Lions game, the Lions had a pass. The quarterback threw a pass, Stafford, and there was clear pass interference where the guy was held. Okay, and this was at a pivotal point in the game because if the pass had held up, the Lions would have easily scored again. They were on a roll, if you will. This broke their momentum, but the referee threw a flag. Okay, and from all the time I've watched football back for decades, they always, if they're going to pick the flag up, they pick it right up. Okay, Chris Collinsworth, who's the premier broadcaster for NBC's football coverage, and certainly experienced wide receiver, and just football's in his veins. It's all he's ever done since he left the University of Florida. He said he's never seen in all his broadcasting career or playing career someone pick a flag up after a minute and a half. In other words, they come to a pretty quick conclusion, Heidi. And also, don't forget something else. When they do have plays that are in dispute, they kick it back to New York to look at videotape and make a ruling on it. Okay? They review all scoring plays, for example, to make sure there was possession of the ball, all that. They took it up after a minute and a half. They took up the flag and said, "No, forget it. There's no penalty." And they showed replay after replay on NBC. Okay, getting to the point of the whole matter, it's crooked as the professional wrestling, and that, I mean, I'm sure all the Packer fans will shriek when they hear that, and all this stuff, and all the Cowboy fans will too. But it's as crooked as you can get. And even this was so obvious, Heidi, that even people, just other players, said obviously they were tweeting around that obviously this is as crooked as finding somebody with a smoking gun in their hand. I mean, Heidi, it should have never happened.
Yeah, my goodness. I don't know. It's like I've heard even the last call was not good. That playoff that they just had on Sunday with the Packers. That was a little odd.
I know. Well, now that one was not as clear cut as the one I just referred to. The one I referred to was as obvious as if you just stuck your leg out and tripped a guy, and I mean, you committed a foul, right? But I mean, what happened was the Cowboy player cornerback had grabbed the receiver and held him and kept him from catching the ball. It's just stuff they do all the time. And that's why the flag was thrown. There was no justification, Heidi, none, zero, nada, for picking that flag back up. None.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. I don't watch enough. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you don't have to be like the professional sports person to see this. And like I say, NBC was showing it this way. They were showing it that way. They're showing it this way. And remember, this is scrutinized by New York, too, the NFL home office. So what I'm saying, by the way, there was another official who was like, who they keep on hand. I forget his name, but NBC, they asked, well, old Bill, what do you think? Well, obviously it's a penalty, At any rate, what I'm saying is there was no justification for picking that up. If that wasn't a smoking gun, Heidi, there aren't any. We deal with conspiratorial issues too. Even if we're taking a break from exotica for a minute, this is exotic as anything. It really is. It's bad to the bone, Heidi. I'll tell you what, years ago, 20-some years ago, when I worked at State Farm, one of my buddies was a big gambler. He was an adjuster like me, and he had a fair amount of money, and he was a big gambler. And what he would do is they had a bookie in Oakland who would take the bets. And these guys back in the late 80s would bet like $2,000-3,000 a week. I mean, fairly big money for guys that are just workers, right? And the guy in Oakland said, "You know this is crooked, don't you? I mean, you're not that stupid, are you?" And he would tell them how to bet, basically, or influence them somehow. But because he would lay the bets off to other bookies. But what I'm saying is, it's as crooked as a $3 bill. And anyway, I'm just bringing that up. I know that's a break from paranormal issues, but I just had to throw that in.
Indeed.
But I had to throw that in. I had to throw that in because we have an actual human monster that has been sighted in Chris Christie.
Oh,
An
my
ugly
goodness.
troll inside and out.
Oh, boy.
But anyway,
Good.
but I want you to explain how, and this was also mentioned before the show, how Christie can be listed at 5'11", and fairly normal sized guy, and Obama's about 6'2" approximately, and he looked like that size next to Obama, yet he's shorter than Jerry Jones. There's something going on here, Heidi.
Yeah. I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Any rate, I didn't mean to depart from that, but so what? I mean, you have a little variety in here. We always have variety in our shows anyway.
Tuesdays.
Is
Tuesdays.
it 8 p.m.
I don't know if the Epic Voyages guys are gonna be like, oh yay, Chris Christie bashing.
Well, look, I mean, I like to keep things moving, and I like to keep things varied. But this is such a weird deal. It's like this fat little ugly troll expands or contracts. I mean, unless they had him walking on stilts next to Obama. But I could promise you I stood right next to Jerry Jones, and I was about a head taller than he was, or almost. We have about a head, 2/3 of a head. Anyhow, all that said, all these evil things have happened to you from the age of 8. It must have made you gun shy about even closing your eyes at night.
You know what? When it came to this type of thing, I wasn't so much terrified in that sense. I don't know where that comes from. I think because I was exposed so young and I didn't like being frightened. I mean, I immediately took to trying to remedy it. So
you got kind of case hardened to it, I guess.
I think so. I mean, I can't say that, I wasn't affected. It really scared me, of course, but I learned to be able to stand my ground and not, run and hide necessarily all the time, but I don't know. I don't know where that came from, but what's good to note though too, in the midst of all this dark and paranormal stuff, it's not all dark and paranormal. I think that there's a balance out there that people need to realize that there's a balance when it comes to a person who's able to see these dark things. They're also able to see light things. And for myself, it was a beautiful mixture of that. I had, as I mentioned before the break, that I'd had some encounters or experiences that were of the very holy sort. Were they near-death experiences? I don't know, but I have very, very, very clear, distinct memories and experiences of being in this heaven-like place. People in white robes, seeing these buildings that the best that I could describe them as were like ancient Greek or Roman buildings that were made of like a crystal, a sparkling like crystal.
Well, now I think I've heard that description before.
Oh yeah, so. It was really mind blowing for myself, because I would always tell my sister that I was closest to, and told her about what it was that I'd seen, and I would just have these memories, and it was just so neat to me, to suddenly, I think I was a teenager, I came across a book that mentioned these buildings in heaven, on the other side, people that were communicating from the other side. And I'm like, oh, look, I showed her, I'm like, I can't believe this. Other people have seen this place. And what was really fascinating to me was later on when I joined that UFO alien abduction group of people. And I went to one of my friends' homes that was part of that group, and when you first come into her home, there's this big beautiful painting exactly like the scene that I have seen in this heaven-like
Really?
place
Did
of
you? Let me ask you. I
the
mean, but
the
did you see?
buildings and the
Yeah.
crystals and the clouds and everything. It was just
I
unbelievable.
don't mean to
And
interrupt, but did you see? Did you see a variety of colors that were very unusual, not like Earth colors, but very vivid,
I I
landscapey kind of colors?
I know what you're speaking of. Like a lot of people describe seeing that kind of thing in like fields and whatnot. I did see that in another type of experience that was also like a heaven-like place. I have seen something like that. It just in like a grove or of some sort in between some mountains where I had
Yeah.
one of the encounters that I had with Jesus. So it was just beautiful, absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful.
Breathtaking kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh gosh, yeah. But what was really interesting to me was, the people that I'd bumped into there, and people wearing the white robes and being guided, and speaking to this person that was guiding me. It was just really, really mind blowing type of experience. But what was interesting to me, backing up a little bit with the painting that I saw. When I saw it, I said to my friend, I'm like, whoa, I just froze at her front door. And I'm like, what? Where did this come from? And like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I've seen this place. And she's like, oh, this? She's like, oh, my dad, he's an artist and he had a near death experience and
Oh,
he painted
really?
what he saw. I'm
Well,
like,
see that. Yeah, I have heard something
wow.
similar descriptions before, and they were just like you're describing.
Oh,
And
just unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean,
well,
just
one of the things that was described is they saw colors that they don't see in Earth. I guess I don't know what it would be, but some kind of
it's like I know what they're
beautiful.
talking about. It's like colors that seem alive.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not just a color. It's not a painting on the wall. It's a color that you see depth, three-dimensional, four-dimensional. You go into the color. I know what they're
Oh,
speaking of. It.
okay.
Yeah, it's a very very different kind of way of expressing color, and
Huh.
yeah, it's different. But
Well, that's a pretty good experience. I like that. Those are pretty. You could get along with experiences like that. Yeah.
well, yeah. But again, so much focus goes on to the negative because it's for
Yeah.
myself having named shadow people and the Hat Man phenomenon. Here I have I have one book on shadow people, I have one book on the Hat Man, and I have four other books. One is on Jesus encounters, the four encounters that I had at the time called Jesus is No Joke. An angelic encounter that I had that taught me a different way of praying, to pray
You
how the
told me about
angels
that. I've never heard that one.
yeah,
What's it
to
called?
pray
That
how the
Angel?
angels pray, and that book is called Picture Prayers. And then I
Oh,
have another book called Diary Blog of the Fickle Finders. It's a book series that's on faith, and that one starts on faith, but it's a book series that'll cover different topics. But that's a graphic like novel, and and then I have another book that's just for fun. That's because I'm a cartoonist as well, and that's another part of that series. But the point is that here I've got all these books. I've got six books, only two on these dark topics. And those are the
hmm.
only things that I get called to speak on, sadly,
Really?
unfortunately. Yeah, it's, the Jesus book, I get to sneak that in there. The prayer stuff I get to sneak in there. But you asked
Yeah.
about the picture prayer book, and I highlight a little bit of that in my book, Jesus No Joke, as well. A lot of people requested that I expand on the topic, so I did. And so that book is based on, I think a lot of us, when it comes to our faith, we don't give a whole lot of thought to what it is that we say to God. Necessarily, it seems to be oftentimes rehearsed, rehashed. you
Yeah.
know, just before we go to bed at night and we're passing out, or we don't have clear thoughts, and it's so traditional. I mean,
Yeah.
it made me sleepy just even thinking about it. And I always hated my prayers just because they were so rehashed and they were so not thought out,
Mm.
And
Mm.
I really didn't enjoy this what was instilled in me as a kid as a time to sit, practice sitting still and you know doing a whole lot of focus on somebody who was said to be listening. So I really I wanted a different way of praying, and I always kind of prayed for a different way of praying. And then I was
Mhm.
like, why do we sit there and close our eyes? And why do we do it only in church? And why do we do it just before we go to bed? And then I'm like, hold on, the pastor's talking a great prayer, and his eyes are open. He's walking and talking, and like, and I tried practicing during the daytime so I don't fall asleep in the middle of my prayers. But
Mhm.
luckily for myself, I had an encounter that I don't know how to exactly put into words as easily as it may seem, even though I wrote a whole book on it. But I had an angelic encounter that
Uh-huh.
essentially showed me that pictures is a thousand words in pictures. That we are trying to formulate our words and get things just right, but you could take a picture and send in a text message, and it could say so much without your
Yeah.
little text underneath it. And they essentially showed me how to go about visually communicating with God and
Mhm.
being open and honest. And for myself, it brought about a different feel, a different stance, a different notion of what it meant to communicate with God, not to pray necessarily, because
Mhm.
it wasn't about taking time out for prayer, but that prayer, it takes no time at all. And my prayers essentially transformed into being something that happened all the time, every time, 100% of the time. And I now don't even think about it because it is going on at all times. I
Hmm.
used to so stop and, oh, I got to say my prayers. Hold on, and then I, like, but to get this simple lesson on how to
Mhm.
integrate that in my days, there's nothing that he can't look at. Let's put it that way. There's
Yeah.
nothing I don't exclude from him. I don't sit in a room alone. I don't ever feel alone. I feel as if the whole time and everything that I do, everything that I decide, everything that I pursue, I'm always conversing with him. What do you think? How's that? You know,
Oh, that's
you know,
good. That's
yeah.
good.
So it's so I recommend. I mean, honestly, that used to be my favorite book that I'd written, Picture Prayers, and I'm looking to probably republish that. It is out right now through a British publisher, but I'd like to, transform it a little bit more. And but I think it's something pretty enjoyable. And oddly enough, when it comes to my writings, my book Jesus is no joke, that talks about the honesty in my discovering that he was real.
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
and putting that into a book form.
Hmm.
I don't know how to put it. It's like people appreciated the honesty. I think a lot of us are at a place where we don't always get that historical lesson of this man named Jesus and what it meant to know him. And my discovering how real he was in my four encounters that I had with him, and a
Yeah, I
heal
guess
a,
so.
and a healing that took place from him that got me to the place that I am today. That my doctors can't explain, but I know what took place. I told them what took place. My doctors just
Mm.
don't want to attribute it always that way. I guess they
Oh, yeah.
all
Yeah.
been trained to turn the other way and say perhaps it was a misdiagnosis. No, 12 years I
Yeah.
suffered from a disease that cannot be cured. So no, it was not a misdiagnosis. It was called a
Oh, there's
healing.
been lots of those cases like that, lots of them, and the Catholic Church often has a medical bureaus that review cases, and some they approve and some they don't as being miraculous. So yeah, I mean, what you're saying is definitely true, and there is in the general population of doctors a reluctance to admit the miraculous, but they do grudgingly admit it. They really do.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So I don't know. It's something that I think more concentration and focus should be put towards the lighter side of things, not just these dark topics, because I would
oh,
not
I
have
agree.
gotten over the dark topics had I not had the light guide me and protect me. Because a lot of people ask me, how do you deal with these demons? And I'm like, had I not had these other experiences, I would not be here talking to you sanely.
Well, I can understand that. I mean, from the age of 8, you, oh boy, it's a heck of a baptism into this kind of paranormal thing. Well, we're going to a break right now. We'll be right back. And, well, good evening. It's good to be back with Heidi Hollis in this lusty discussion of every kind of paranormal issue there ever was. I tell you what, Heidi, the positive is pretty good, and I really have enjoyed the exposure to it I've had. I really have. It makes life, frankly, worth living. Of course, I don't know, this particular audience probably hasn't heard about it, but the primary metaphysical thing I've had, the relation to God and Jesus and what have you, was when I had the odor of sanctity experience in Our Lady of Martyrs Shrine in Auriesville, New York in 2008. And just in brief, what happened, for those not familiar with it, I was up in New York looking for real estate, and I didn't really find it appropriate for what I was interested in. And I was going to take that last day, a Wednesday, to just play tourist in the Mohawk Valley. And it's right near Albany. And I was going to fly out of Albany Thursday, so I was going to just drive in the morning, that next morning. But anyhow, after 10 minutes, I find Our Lady of Martyrs Shrine, and I'd converted to Catholicism a couple of years previous. And, I started smelling a smell of roses within about 15 minutes of hitting the property, and it was about 40 or 50 acres, actually about 70 acres on a plateau, kind of windy. And there was no church services going on. It was just, there were 2 chapels on the property, but, no services, only about 3 people in general milling around, workmen, cleaning up and stuff. And, some people at the museum, but that's about it. Anyhow, Heidi, this was powerful. It just like grabbed you by the throat as far as how powerful it was. And I have bad sense of smell from being in Texas and, exposed to the allergies down here. It makes you congested and stuff. And just from being in New York for a couple of days didn't make you cured necessarily. And Heidi, this went on and on and on for about 40 minutes. And the only roses were about 20 acres away from me and just a handful at that. And I went, I talked to the curator there at the museum, and she said, basically, you smelled it too, and in a shocked way. And I said, yeah. And every 6 to 12 months, something like that happens. Somebody experiences this odor of sanctity issue and the unusual, powerful smell of roses where they shouldn't be any, because it was just pines and maples. It wasn't like it was just a tropical, garden or anything. Anyhow, that experience will stay with me, Heidi, if I live to be 400.
No, I understand. When something like that happens, it's like, you trust yourself. You know your senses. You know what you're...
Well, yeah, you've been you long enough to know what's normal and what's not normal. And I do go into greenhouses periodically down here if I'm looking for something or just snooping for plants or whatever. And I know what what they, how I react is how good a sense of smell I have, which is not very good at all. And so I've been me long enough to know what's exotic, and you would too. I mean, this is a breezy place, kind of up on a little, third of a mile up, and no services, no nothing, no incense, in other words, going on or anything like that. And I grew up partially in the Northeast, and it doesn't smell like a rose garden. I mean, even though this is rural, it's just pines, maples, nothing else. And this was, yes, when an exotic experience occurs, yes. And one definitely did. And it was awe-inspiring, and it had another feel to it, too. Like we talked about on a show we had recently, it did have another feel. There was a feeling like the kind of terminology that I don't usually use because I'm not overly dramatic in my thought processes, but I was saying, this is sacred ground here. In other words, it had a feel of the holy around that place. More than just say, a nice church would say yes, you'd feel, like it's a holy place. But this was another dimension, kind of similar to what you're talking about, a real feel to it. And I'm not the only one that's felt that up there at all, really.
Right, yeah.
And one of the priests from my church I go to is familiar with the place, and he felt the same thing. It's just a really different place. It's called Our Lady of Martyrs Shrine in Oreysville, New York, for those who ever want to visit it. But
Right. No,
Heidi,
it's pretty
what's
cool. I
something?
mean, when people get a chance to experience something like that, and I think, you know, 9 times out of 10, I really, really, truly believe that most people will have experienced something that's a little special, a little paranormal, a little
Yeah,
outlandish, or even just a deja vu in their lifetime. Honestly, I think it's 100% of the time, but I think people don't trust their senses always. And my
yeah,
my
yeah.
favorite one is when people say, "I thought my eyes are playing tricks on me." I'm like, "Come on now,
Right,
your
right.
eyes are not." In the back room planning to trick you. They,
No,
these are the
no,
same eyes that
definitely.
you trust every day to get up, get in your car, and drive 100 miles. But oh boy, those tricky eyes! They just saw an
Yeah, I know.
alien. Really, come on.
I know what you're
So
saying. I
yeah.
know
So,
what you're saying.
but or they just think their imagination. Really, imagination. Uh, your imagination can have you draw a stick person on paper, but it's not going to play out a whole scenario in front of your
Well,
eyes. I
I know
mean,
what you're
it's
saying. I've heard that kind of
crazy.
lingo. That what am I losing my noodles or something like that? Yes, I know.
Yeah.
But well, I had something you could say that you could describe it as being paranormal, and it really was. Someone could double think it and say, "Oh no, it was just a weird happenstance." Okay, just in very brief, this happened just Saturday. It was kind of good. What happened was I was thinking about it. I have to find a tree for a person. They want a 12-inch caliper tree that's 12 inches across at the trunk. It's about a 45-foot tree. Okay, they want three trunks. Multi they call it, and it's hard to find right now. And we'll find it, but I mean it's hard. But I had a strong sense. Call Donnie and tell him to look for a double, a two trunk thing. Which no one. By the way, the reason this is bizarre is no one ever even thinks about a double. They're secondary desirability and they're looked past, and we haven't even mentioned a double. I mean, you wouldn't even mention it to anybody. Anyway, I had this strong feeling to tell him to look for one, and then an hour later he calls me saying, "What do you think if I look for a double?" Now, I know that sounds like a prosaic small thing that's inconsequential, but Heidi, that was bizarre.
Yeah, that's something else. But I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Crazy cool though.
It is, but not like you're saying. Nothing can compare with the divine thing. That was some. Oh man. Uh,
Yeah, no, I mean, but again, it's like I think that more needs to be put on focus for that, and so much gets emphasized on the paranormal, the strange, and it's like it does get people at the edge of another reality, yes,
well,
but
it does.
one thing that I think that also I'd like to touch on this evening is my newest book, The Hat Man. Before our time is up here,
Sure.
um, the Hat Man book, that's something that has been a labor, and I mean a serious labor for me to get completed.
How
Um,
long did it take you to do it?
this
Or
to write the book in general is
yeah.
not so much. It's not so much what I mean as far as the whole topic.
Oh,
When I first came to realize that, the shadow people topic, I had kind of categorized this Hat Man guy as being a Hat Man shadow. And that's something that I had put on my website when I first put his image up on my site and got my book, The Secret War, out in 2001. The book was written in 1997 and got distributed around, and I think it got leaked a little bit here and there. But and then 2001, I put my images up on my website of the different shadow people. Again, that's at HeidiHollis.com. And I put something called the Hat Man shadow up.
mhm.
And I put that up, and almost immediately responses and comments in regard to this guy that I had up there just changed, totally changed.
Yeah.
And to describe what the Hat Man looks like, he is a guy that has a hat, three-piece suit, trench coat,
Three-piece suit.
cape.
Oh,
I, yeah,
oh
indeed.
yeah.
Trench coat,
Snappy. Yeah. Yeah.
cape, and sometimes he's seen with a chained watch on his hip. Other
Wow.
times you can see his eyes as a glowing, beautiful red, not beautiful, ugly,
Mm.
and or sometimes a solid black eyes if you see his skin and whatnot um, against the shadows that he often hides in. But what
Oh.
was interesting, though, as people were sending their emails to me, they're just fully concluding how his presence was so real. It wasn't like a shadowy presence. I've had people say, yeah, he does sit in the shadows, but he sits on my bed. He talks
Yeah.
to me. I started getting these
Really?
types of emails, and I'm like, what? What is going on here? Shadow people, they're more nosy. They're intrusive. When they're seen, they may run or they may come and jump on you. Hat Man lets you acknowledge his presence. And
Yeah.
the thing is with him, when it comes to his type of encounter,
Yeah.
people feel outright as if they are in jeopardy of some sort. Their soul, their
Yeah.
well-being, their family, their health, their life. Now, when it comes to shadow people, again, they feel like they're nosy, they're observing, but they may also choke them. They may have, actually feel threatened, as I did. But the Hat Man, it was so odd for me to be taking in these emails, and I didn't want to look any further, because every time I did, everybody around me started experiencing negative nightmares, or
Oh yeah.
feeling ill, or feeling like something was awry, and they would all know that, Heidi, what are you working on? I'd get asked, and quit it because I can't sleep at night, and I'm like, wow, what is this guy? What is going on here? And I put it to the side, as much as I possibly could, but the emails kept
Yeah.
pouring in. My emails went from the topic of, aliens, first ghosts, then aliens, then shadow people, to 90% Hat Man emails. The
Hmm.
progression has been absolutely crazy. Now, what is interesting also in the patterns that I've seen with him is, some of the things that he suggests, some of the things that he does, and some of the things
Yeah.
that people experience. Now, I've got the few handful of people that say, "Oh, Hatman is a nice guy. He's my guardian. He does this
Hmm.
because I wasn't scared of him." I'm like, "Oh, you're so big and bad. I'm so glad for you." But it's not. It's not about that.
Yeah.
It's about, what was he there for? Did you invite him? Come on. This is, it's like he shows up to people who are kind of on his side of the fence, which is like the negative side, I'd suggest, and then the encounters with Jesus are going up exponentially as well. And he seems to
Hmm.
be showing up to others on his side of the fence. Now, then there's those sitters that experience both of them. And that, I don't think that's the best position to be in. I knew somebody that had been met with both of them, and it's like, what's the
Yeah.
meaning of this, and what's going on? It's like, you've got to decide, who are you going to be with,
Yeah.
crossing over to the other side. And Hat Man, he shows up around illness, he shows up around death, he shows up around accidents, he shows up around anger, arguments, almost as if to feed off these things. But
Hmm.
another thing to put into perspective, when those that have experienced him are oftentimes very young children. Uh,
Yeah.
what the heck is going on with that? A lot of people are like, oh, the age of innocence. God protects you. The evil can't affect you until, you're at
Right.
the age of communion, and you could, answer for your own sins and whatnot. But this Hat Man somehow is wiggling his way into the innocence of very young children. In my book, I have
Really?
over 50 stories of different people who've written me over the years, and a lot of them, I was 3 when I first saw them. I was 4. I was 5. And and people that are writing me now, their children are talking about, who's the man in the hat? He's entering my nightmares. It's horrific what's going on. And what really just disgusts me about it all is the sheer number, absolute number of this guy showing up to the most innocent of us, and
Yeah.
these kids not having the chance to really get to know anything else but his presence. And they grow
Yeah.
up, and then they write me. Now, I'll tell you a story about this one that really is disturbing. This guy wrote me, and this is in the Hat Man book. And he said, I remember I must have been maybe 15 months old or something. I'm like, wow, what a memory. And
Hmm.
he said, because I was in a crib yet, and I remember him looking over the rail of the crib, and him
Yeah.
distinctly putting into my soul and into my mind, knowing if I cried or screamed, he was going to kill me.
Really?
Now, what kind of horror can he emit that a child that young could get the idea of what death is? And he obeyed because he knew. Now,
Huh.
what is, and it goes on to, his mother came into the room. He saw the Hat Man holding him.
Yeah.
She'd responded because she heard her son crying in a grown man's voice, almost like yelling at the Hat Man, and the door was
Really?
slammed on her face. Yes. So it's
Good
like,
Lord.
yeah, I mean, absolutely violent. What is he doing with these kids? What is he? Why is he trying to convince them that he
Mhm.
is a part of their life? And in fact, he's come to some of the people that have written me saying, "You know me. Let me stay here. I've known you since you were a kid. You know me, so let me be here." And so what is he trying to create? Some kind of a comfort level, some uh, feeling of knowing, and
Some
it's
acceptance or
yeah,
something.
and
Yeah.
that's a good way of putting it. And it's like, this really needs to be paid attention to. A lot of people think that the end times, it's going to be, the angels in heaven battling it out, and we're going to sit there with some
Yeah.
popcorn on the lawn going, "Woo, here it goes, everybody." When
Yeah.
actually the war is going on in the secrecy and privacy of people's homes. And that's why I call my first book The Secret War, because the war is
Yeah.
going on already, between the good and the and evil. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not something that, I mean, if if the enemy wants to have an advantage on you, he's not going to want you to see him coming. And how perfect
Mhm.
to come under this disguise of darkness when we're at our most vulnerable, asleep at night, and you wake up to horror, and you're made to think it's a nightmare. It's not a nightmare.
Mm.
This is a reality that's going on. And what is that saying? The greatest trick that the devil ever played was to convince people that he wasn't real, that he didn't exist. Well, he
Right.
exists, and he comes in a lot of different forms. And I
Mm.
equate darkness as being darkness. I don't care, oh, that's a little minion, that's a big minion. No. When it comes to these
Yeah.
negative beings, and I'm talking about negative aliens, uh, shadow people, anything and everything that's not invited, that is not supposed to be there, that you feel fear from, is something that you need to be vigilant about. And and society needs to quit with the laughter when it comes to it. I have a good time with most topics, and I try to propel and put these topics out there in my books in a casual manner, so people aren't fearful of it, but so they can take it in little bites and hopefully digest it and be able to, protect themselves, because the chances are that they are going to be met with something in some form that's quite dark, and they need to resort back to their faith, or they might as well get a shoe and throw it at it, because
Mm.
nothing is going to take it down. You're looking into the eyes of a beast of some sort. And then I get these emails saying, "Oh, but I don't know if my faith is strong. I don't like church." Dude, a demon sat on your couch, and you're telling me that I don't know about my faith. Dude, you better find your faith, because
I
that
guess so.
demon's gonna get closer and more comfortable. If you
Yeah.
value your soul, and trust me, you got one, whether you're gonna fully acknowledge it or not. So it's time to, snap out of it already. It gets me to a point of, just being so just disgusted with some of the stuff that I see, and some of the things that people say. "Oh, I don't know about
Yeah.
that faith stuff." I'm like, "Well, why did you write me? You asked me how to get rid of this. I'm going to tell you how to get rid of this. But first, you got to get right with
Yeah.
your faith." So I also welcome people to go to my other website. I have a new book I'm going to be putting out soon, theotherfword.com. Though
Yeah.
I have a book on faith already out there that it's for all ages, 7 and up, and then I have another one that's going to be coming out, also dealing with the topic of faith. That's just going to be called The Other F Word, because, man, if there's any weapon that I think is best for people to get, and it's to get their faith together, get God together in your heart, soul, and Jesus as your sword to take these things
Yeah.
out. Because
I
man,
guess so. I guess so.
some wicked
Well, I
stuff.
wonder why he's such a snappy dresser. I wonder why the Hat Man comes with 3-piece suits. It's
To be
trench
honest,
coats.
you know what? It's like if he didn't want people to recognize it being him all the time doing these things, he would change it up a bit. But I think he wants to be recognized. So why would he want that acknowledgement? He wants you to know that he's coming and he's coming for you. And he wants you to be able to relate to other people's stories and what he's capable of, which is a highly disturbing thing. So again, I welcome people to go check out my book, The Hat Man, The True Story of Evil Encounters. And, I really did my best to put everything that I know in regard to the topic and, get people ready and to get rid of him. He does not have to stay there. The shadow people don't have to stay there. Negative aliens don't have to be in your life. And there are good aliens out there too.
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah,
No,
I mean, but a lot of people feel defeated. They're like, "Oh, I'm paralyzed" when they come. And like, if you could realize that there's just somebody whispering in your ear, "You're paralyzed. You're paralyzed." When you can see that, it's somebody telling you this, you can move just fine. You're not paralyzed. I mean, if they could take you on for who you are, they would come as you are, sitting there on your couch and say, "Hey, how's it going? I was thinking I'd terrorize you." No, they come when your guard is down because they can't take you out the way that you think that they can. Their power is all that you give them. That's it.
Well, this has been an amazing show. Golly, I knew you had some unusual experiences, but you shocked even me. And
lots of material, so it's something that I'm passionate about and something that I would do in my sleep if I could, because I just feel like, lots is going on now, and a lot of people need to, also check out paranormalpledge.com. And that's something that I really welcome people to write me, and join Paranormal Pledge. And my email is dasoutlander, DASOutlander @gmail.com. And I do my best to, share people's stories and give some advice. And I welcome people to share their stories. So, this paranormal topic can be seen for what it is, a normal topic. And we just need to all, own up to it and take it down,
Very good, very good. Well, I guess I want to invite the folks to, of course, come back to Epic Voyagers 8 p.m. Central next Monday. But also tomorrow night we have a good show with John Corner on the Kevin Cook Show at 8 p.m. Central, and should have a lot of interesting information on that conspiracy issues and the links between them. And things are very seldom the way they seem, Heidi, very seldom the way they seem.
Indeed. Lots needs to be done, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, it really is. But, I hope folks have appreciated this. And once again, I'm glad we put the emphasis on the positive, too. I mean, the paranormal isn't always just a ghost, having a whiskey sour in the corner of the room or something. But, I mean, there is a divine input there, and I think people should be aware of that. That'll give them a little faith you're talking about, that isn't all just grim and muck and lurking figures. I mean, oh, man. That's why I'm glad we've got exorcists running about. And anyhow, on that note, I guess we better wish them good night. And thank you, Epic Voyagers. We'll see you another time. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's Epic Voyages. I'm Roger Peacock for Epic. Until next time.